guys, welcome back to another episode of Engage ED. I am your host, April Kirkendall, and today's episode is going to be all about pivoting in your communication. If this is your first time listening to this podcast, it is all about bridging the gaps in communication. So, you guys are not going to believe this. Earlier this week, I recorded the episode. It's supposed to come out every Tuesday. I named the Tuesday Transformative Tuesday because we're transforming how we are operating in education, right? Well, the audio only recorded for the first 5 minutes, and I just recorded the episode again, and the entire episode was blank. So I have my computer right here in front of me to make sure that it is consistently recording. It's not muting itself. I'm not sure why it's doing that. I may have to go and purchase a different mic. We'll see if I have any other issues, but this week I've just been pivoting consistently. Like, things have been happening. For example, me recording the podcast for you all, trying to make sure it's getting out to you in time, and I'm having to re-record 2 times now. So sometimes things happen, and we have to make sure that we roll out a clear plan of how we are going to overcome and reestablish what our initial plan was. Sometimes we do have to pivot, we have to figure out how we're going to overcome an issue, what plan are we going to set, and how we are going to resolve that. So we're going to go ahead and get into the first segment. It's called Engage ED Updates. So I recently came across an article from US Today. It's from their news press articles, and it was an article about a former educator who was an educator for over 30 years. He was a social studies teacher, and he was placed on an investigation from the school board because a parent reached out through text message to the superintendent stating that she was upset about the books that he had in his classroom library. Now, the teacher was never knowledgeable of this issue because the parent went around the teacher and did not directly communicate their concerns with them. So the teacher was just very disheartened by this, and the end result was he resigned from his position. Now, when I read this article, I was very disappointed in how this issue was resolved. The teacher shouldn't feel that they should have to resign from their position. This could have been a successful result if those lines of communication were much more effective. So we're going to be talking about how we can regain that in those partnerships. So there were a couple of questions that were asked in the article. How do we rebuild trust when both sides feel unheard and unsupported? So I hear this a lot. Teachers feel like they're always undersupported. Parents feel the same. They feel like no one really understands what's going on their end, and the teachers feel the same. So I feel like those relationships really should be established, and a rapport should be built at the beginning of the school year so that you won't even run into these issues. Of course, you're going to always run into issues, but the strategy that I'm getting ready to teach you is going to be life-changing, okay? So first, you have to make sure that you are showing empathy and patience. It takes patience to build trust and to build that relationship. At the beginning of the school year, you have to make sure that you are staying in constant contact with those parents. One thing that I did in my educational career, I always welcomed the parents to the classroom, let them know who I was, and then I would stay in contact with all parents each week through email. Now, you are still going to have issues with parents, but how are you going to resolve those issues effectively, right? How do we rebuild that partnership? Okay, so what we're going to do, we are going to make sure that the parent knows, hey, I have the best interest of your child. Okay, I want them to be successful in my classroom, and I want the best for them. Let them know that you care about their child. Okay, and then from a teacher standpoint, you have to listen to the parent. We are people. We're just people. We want to be heard from both ends. But just listen to their concerns. Let them know that, hey, I hear you, and this is what I feel like we should do to resolve this. Okay. If there's like a student who you have a concern about in particular, while you are establishing those relationships, just make sure that you're always updating them on how they're doing in the classroom so that that parent will know that, hey, this teacher actually cares about my child. Also, from a parent standpoint, parents have to also understand the challenges that teachers face. In today's time in education, specifically speaking from a language teacher standpoint, those classrooms, and I'm speaking from public education, those classrooms are overpopulated. I don't know if you all know this, but they are overpopulated. Unless it's like a charter school or like a IB school program, they are overpopulated. And teachers only have so much time where they can consistently contact you about something that's going on in the classroom or stay in constant contact. So that's why I say you have to make sure that you establish from day one, and I'm going to teach you how to do that today. Let's get to the second question. What steps can schools take to ensure parents feel like partners rather than adversaries? I love this question because we want to always make sure that parents are a part of the education. I know that was something that I always wanted in my classroom. I wanted each party to be involved so that we can make sure that we give the child, the student, the best educational experience that we have to offer. So this question is posing towards the school, not so much towards the teacher. So I'm going to answer from both standpoints. So what can the schools do? Okay, so the parents don't feel like adversaries. They can host events. Okay, what do those events look like? Meet and greets, meet the teacher night, parent-teacher conferences. All of this is in person so that they can know, hey, this is who my child is spending their time with during the daytime. And let me go and have a conversation with them. Let me introduce myself. Let me understand what's going on in the classroom. All of those steps build trust and build those relationships, build their rapport, get to know your students and their parents outside of the classroom so that when they do hear from you, you won't seem like a stranger, right? So one thing that I would do, if your school is not a school that typically hosts these types of events, you as a teacher can do this on your own. One thing that I would do every week, well, at the beginning of the school year, I would send a welcome email, and then every week I would send a progress report. Our system, our database system could put together a progress report for us, and we could email that progress report to the parents. So I would email a progress report for all students, whether they were passing or failing in the class. I would let the parent know, hey, this is what is going on in the classroom. This is my concern. And these are the steps that I feel like we need to take together to resolve what this issue is at hand. Now, when you contact your parents, right, don't always contact them when there's something wrong. There has to be one positive thing that is going on in that child's educational career, right? Even if you're contacting them about, hey, they're failing my class, let them know that they're coming to class on time. Think of at least one positive aspect of what their child is doing so they won't feel defensive. They won't feel like this teacher doesn't really care about my child, because that's how it's going to relate if it's through email, okay? Now, if you can't get in contact with the parent, call them, okay? Pick up the phone and give them a call and let them know whatever it was that you were going to send in that initial email. And then having those parent-teacher conferences or just meetings in person always helps and trumps over whatever issue it may be. For this particular article, I feel like the parent should have come to the teacher directly instead of going to the superintendent. For the parent to text the superintendent, I don't know many teachers who can just text the superintendent of the school board. So my interpretation of that is the parent must personally know this superintendent, or maybe she was on the school board. It doesn't say, but she went around the teacher's head, around the principal, and contacted the superintendent to the point now they have an investigation going on, and the teacher feels the need to resign from his job. So this is very disheartening to hear that. The teacher stated in the article that he would have expressed or explained his curriculum, right? If there are books that you don't agree with, contact the teacher directly first, because you all could have resolve that issue. I know in my previous school board last year in January, they passed a state law where if there was a new book or a new film that was being shown in class that was against what was going on in the curriculum, the teacher had to send out an email about that. And if the parents disagreed, they would have to contact the teacher and let them know, hey, I don't want my student involved in this lesson, and request that you give them an alternative assignment. So in this case, the student could have received an alternative assignment and the issue would have been resolved. And then the teacher and the parent could have established a better communication system going forward from there. So there were so many steps that could have been taken, but unfortunately, they weren't taken in this situation that we have here. But taking these small steps will help the parent perceive a better overview of how they are and who they are in this educational process. So let's go ahead and get to our next segment called Ayúdame a abrir Q&A. While you're listening to this episode, if you feel that you have any questions or need advice on any issues that you may have experienced or currently experiencing in your educational career or just work career, corporate America career in general, send me an email at engageedpodcast@gmail.com. Our question for today comes from a Reddit post from user Turtleneck360. The title of this post is called, "This is why I don't call home. Sometimes dealing with the student's behavior is much more pleasurable than dealing with the parents." Here's what they wrote. "I decided to break my cardinal rule and called home about a student. Off the bat, the mother was defensive about her son. This is the first time I had spoken to her, but I guess the school has called her often enough that she is tired of it. I cannot deal with my son until I know what's going on over there with the school and his teachers. Yes, we are all out to get your son. I basically got yelled at. I ended the conversation and hung up. Parents, please be a parent and don't be a terrible person. That's how you get misbehaving children. You teachers, think twice about calling home. Sometimes it's better just to deal with the habitual problems if it's minor enough." First off, I feel your frustration, Turtleneck360. I have had terrible conversations with parents, but over the years, I have learned how to establish better communication. So this is what I would suggest in this issue. As I said earlier in the first segment, establish those open lines of communication at the beginning of the school year so that you don't run into these issues. Now, I have had parents who would block the school's phone number at a previous school that I worked at. So what I would do, I would start calling from my personal cell phone. I got a Google Voice number and I would call and give out that number at the beginning of the school year to let parents and students know, hey, if you have any issues, please contact me. And we would speak directly through there. Okay? Because if I'm calling you, please know there is a huge concern that needs to be resolved, right? Second, if you are having a defensive parent on the phone, this is your invitation to have a parent-teacher conference. You need to speak to them in person at this point. There's no reason to be having a conversation about a student that you are concerned about and the information is just not being received well, okay? So then you invite them to have a parent-teacher conference. In this parent-teacher conference, the parent and the student both need to be present. That way, everyone is clear on what is expected and what needs to happen going forward. Now, if you are that teacher who's afraid of getting into an argument or having to communicate with a parent who is being defensive, invite your administrator, the assistant principal, your supervisor, whoever that may be. Invite them into that meeting so that way they can sit in and they can kind of act as a mediator if something so should happen. Leading up to those parent-teacher conferences, you always want to offer a follow-up, okay? So whether you are inviting them to a parent-teacher conference through email or phone call, however you initially contacted them, that is the way that you need to make sure that you follow up to make sure that, hey, they're still coming, right? Dear so-and-so, I just want to let you know that I look forward to meeting you on such and such date. Please let me know if you still plan to be present at the parent-teacher conference, and we need so-and-so to be, which is a student, to be present as well. You will resolve from there, and 9 times out of 10, I promise you, doing these strategies, you will see a transformation happen with your communication in the classroom with the parents or the teachers. Why do I say 9 times out of 10 and not 10 out of 10? Well, because some parents just won't communicate with you. They will either not respond to your email, they either won't answer the phone, or the phone number that they provided to the school is no longer in service. There are a plethora of reasons why, right? Or just like in this post, the parent really doesn't want to hear anything that the teacher has to say. They don't trust them, because that trust and that rapport wasn't built at the initial start of the school year, right? Just be persistent with your communication and your collaboration with them. Make them a part of that process of their child being successful in the classroom. And if you do this, those challenging conversations will turn into productive ones. I promise you. All right, now we're going to go ahead and move on to our last segment that is called Language Learning Gems. I'm going to share a personal story of mine, and then I'm going to give you some language learning tips. So in today's language learning gems, I want to share with you an experience that I have been having with my twins. You all know that I share with you that I have 2 11-month-old twins, and we have been practicing our Spanish. We've been learning Spanish throughout our morning routine, and one of those ways we've been doing that is through music. So have you guys ever heard of the nursery rhyme called Los Pollitos? Well, it's a classical Spanish nursery rhyme, and I'm going to sing just a little bit of the song, just a little snippet of it, so that you can kind of hear some of those Spanish words, and I'm going to tell you how you can use the song to teach at different levels of the language learning process. Okay, it goes a little something like this. Los pollitos dicen pío, 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 cuando tienen hambre, cuando tienen frío. It's such a sweet song, right? And I love the tune. Like it's when you hear it aloud, it's so upbeat, like do 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 do. Like it's so upbeat, and we have our instruments, we shake and we sing, and it's just a fantastic language learning tool at all levels. So if you are a beginner and you are just starting out learning a new language, learning Spanish, whatever your target language may be, you want to make sure that your focus is on the pronunciation of the words and the rhythm or the beat to the song, okay? Make sure you're hearing those sounds and try to mimic those sounds, right? So, for example, pío, pío, pío. Try to say that. That's a short syllable word. Try to say that, okay? And then move on to pollitos, which is 3 syllables, right? So work your way up. Focus on the pronunciation of those words and those sounds. Now, if you are intermediate level, I'm going to teach you a way that I would have my students learn in the classroom. You're going to make a list on paper or on a dry erase board. You're going to do 3 columns, right? Your first column is going to be words that you already know from your prior knowledge. Maybe you already know frío, cold, right? So you're going to put that in your list of words you already know. The second column is going to be new words, words that you do not know, okay? List those words down. And then your third column is going to be verbs, okay? List all the verbs that you learned from the song. And then you're going to go line by line, and you're going to try to create your own sentences with the words that you already know from your prior language and the words that you don't know. Create your own sentences. And when I say create your own sentences, I mean about the song, right? So reinforce that they're hungry. Reinforce that they are cold, but say it in your own words. Do not use a translator. Now, once you finish using this strategy, you're going to go back to the lyrics, the song lyrics, and you're going to go line by line and see if you can understand what the song is saying now, right? And you can use a dictionary to help you, but I do not recommend or suggest using a translator unless you just want to check your work. I always compare using a translator like using a calculator in math, right? If you're doing a math equation, a new math equation, and you're trying to learn how to compute it, Why would you use a calculator? If you use a calculator, you're not going to remember how to do it, right? So always build upon that prior knowledge. I always stress to my students to build upon the knowledge you already know. Don't forget anything that you've learned because you're going to use it again. So build upon that, and you're going to see how your language skills are going to continue to improve. So just be consistent with that. Lastly, my advanced learners, you already know the words, right? You're going to make the same list that you did that I introduced for the intermediate learners. But what you are going to do, instead of making sentences, you're going to create a complete new story. Tell us what happened to the little chickens, right? Where did they go? What happened to them at the end of this story? This is going to help you practice those complex sentence structures, and you're going to build more confidence in using the language. It'll also help you gain more passion and love for the language as well, because you'll see how much more you can stretch yourself with just doing these short, small strategies. You'll see how you can expand your creativity while using the language. Before we wrap up today's episode, I do want to give you all a little teaser of next week's episode. We're going to be discussing engaging students in the digital age. Now, I know that a lot of us say no phones in the classroom, right? I'm going to teach you all how to use that and how to reinforce it in your classroom so that you don't have any issues. That's all for today's episode of Engaged ED. You guys, I cannot believe this is my third time recording this episode. I hope you enjoyed it and that you enjoyed the content and the topics. If you enjoyed this episode, please, on whichever podcast platform that you are listening on, or if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe and leave a review. And remember, we are all in this together. So let's keep building those bridges and breaking those barriers. I'll see you all next week.